In the early 1990s, a quiet, unassuming man from Colorado began making a series of very unusual claims. He said he had been contacted, not once, not twice, but over dozens of times by a group of extraterrestrial beings from the Andromeda galaxy. They weren't hostile, he said. In fact, they were here to help. But not everyone would be so lucky. This man, whose real name was Ralph Amigron, would become known to the world as Alex Collier. And once he started talking, he didn't stop. He spoke of hidden wars beneath the Earth, shadow governments manipulating society, and a distant galactic history that connected humanity to alien civilizations far older than time itself. But the part that really shook people were his eerily detailed visions of the future. Not just vague predictions or cryptic metaphors, but names, dates, global events, things that sounded insane until they started to happen. Some said he was delusional, others said he was a prophet. But over 30 years later, a disturbing number of his claims are beginning to line up with real-world developments, political shifts, surveillance technology, even the presence of strange, unidentified craft in our skies. So today, we're going to step into the world of Alex Collier and explore the messages he claimed came from another galaxy. Because whether you believe he was chosen or simply chasing a fantasy, there's one thing that's becoming harder to deny. The future he described is starting to look a lot like the present. The visitors Andromedans. According to Alex Collier, the first time it happened, he was just 8 years old. It didn't start with flashing lights or a spaceship landing in his backyard. There was no beam of light pulling him into the sky. Instead, it began in his mind. He described it as a kind of telepathic download, like thoughts that weren't his arriving fully formed. Visions, voices, feelings, impossible to ignore. And whoever, or whatever, was sending them wasn't human. Over the years, these mysterious transmissions continued, and by the time Collier reached adulthood, the picture had become much clearer. They were coming from a race of advanced extraterrestrials who lived in the Andromeda galaxy, some 2.5 million light-years from Earth. But they didn't just live there, they existed on a higher vibrational plane, something Collier called fifth-dimensional consciousness. These beings, known simply as the Andromedans, were not monsters. They didn't want to conquer Earth. They weren't here for our gold or our water or our DNA. They were here to warn us. They told Collier that humanity was being influenced, manipulated by a far older, far more sinister group of entities. Negative extraterrestrials. At the top of that hierarchy, according to the Andromedans, was a reptilian species from the Alpha Draconis system. Cold-blooded, shape-shifting, and interdimensional. These beings weren't just playing political games. Collier said they had infiltrated every major power structure on Earth, governments, corporations, media, and that their influence ran so deep, most people would never know they were even there. And what do these reptilians want? Control, yes. Domination, of course. But their true hunger was far more disturbing. They feed on fear, literally. According to Collier, these dark forces harvest negative human emotions, anger, hatred, panic, sorrow, and consume them as a kind of energetic sustenance. The more chaos, the more division, the more war and suffering, the stronger they become. It's not just metaphorical. Collier insisted it was real, energetic vampirism on a planetary scale. And as unbelievable as it sounds, he claimed that everything from global conflict to organized religion to even mass entertainment had been shaped carefully and deliberately to keep humanity in a state of perpetual fear. Because fear, according to the Andromedans, is the ultimate resource. A hijacked planet. Imagine waking up one day and realizing everything you were taught about human history, our governments, our progress, even our religions, was wrong. Not just slightly wrong, but intentionally distorted. That's what Alex Collier claimed had happened to Earth. According to him, our planet has been under covert control, not just for decades, but for thousands of years, and not by human hands. Collier said a secret coalition of extraterrestrial groups led by the same reptilian beings from Alpha Draconis had hijacked Earth long ago. They didn't do it with weapons or armies. They did it through infiltration. Subtle, systematic, complete. And who are their agents on the ground? Collier pointed the finger at a very specific list. Global elites, hidden ancient bloodlines, secret space programs, high-level government figures. In his words, these institutions weren't serving the public, they were serving someone else. He said these leaders are part of something called the Orion Group, an interstellar alliance of control-based civilizations that view planets like Earth as resources to be mined, not just for materials or labor, but for consciousness itself. They see humans as a resource, not as equals. Alex Collier, 1994 lecture. To them, Collier said, "We're cattle. Our thoughts, our dreams, our fears are tools. Tools they can exploit. And the terrifying part? Collier believed this manipulation wasn't limited to Earth's surface. He claimed there are secret human colonies on the Moon, on Mars, and even further, completely outside public knowledge, run by breakaway civilizations that answer only to their off-world overlords. He said some of these programs are so advanced, so compartmentalized, that even most world leaders don't know they exist. And yet all of it, according to Collier, traces back to one idea: Earth is not free. It may look like a planet of nations and borders and democracy, but in reality, Collier said it's a prison, beautiful, diverse, but locked in a system designed to keep us asleep. And that system, he claimed, is starting to crack. 3. 2030s to 2050s, the fork in the road. By the early 1990s, Alex Collier had already laid out a roadmap of what was coming. He didn't call it a prophecy. He said it was a timeline, one that had been shown to him by the Andromedans, a possible future. And according to him, humanity was headed straight for a fork in the road. One path leads to light, the other into darkness. In the best-case scenario, Collier said humanity would wake up. We'd break free from manipulation, begin to understand our true nature, conscious, powerful, multidimensional. In this future, we transcend fear. We dismantle corrupt systems. We stop destroying the planet and ourselves. And when that shift happens, he claimed, we'd be welcomed, officially, into what he called the Galactic Federation, an alliance of advanced civilizations that operate not on control, but on cooperation, consciousness, and spiritual alignment. But the other path, the one Collier feared we were already sliding into, was mechanized dystopia. He warned of a future where humanity embraces artificial intelligence, not as a tool, but as a master, where digital surveillance becomes so normalized we forget what privacy ever meant. A world run not by politicians, but by predictive algorithms. And at the top, the same ancient elite, the ones serving the Orion Group, using technology to maintain control not just of actions, but of thoughts. Resource wars, climate collapse, widespread depopulation. He said all of it was on the table if we chose fear over awareness. Now here's the strange part. Alex Collier made these claims in 1994, at a time when the internet was barely a thing, and artificial intelligence was something out of a sci-fi novel he was already talking about. Autonomous machines replacing humans, global digital currencies, mass surveillance hidden under the guise of security, and a growing technocratic elite pulling the strings behind closed doors. It all sounded crazy back then, paranoid, delusional. But now, just take a look around. The world today looks eerily similar to what Collier described 30 years ago. And if his timeline is accurate, we haven't reached the end. We've only just entered the critical phase. The Andromedans called this period the window, a time of testing, a time of choice. And they said the next few decades would determine whether humanity breaks free or disappears into the machine. What you tolerate becomes your reality. 4. Humanity's true origin. According to Alex Collier, the biggest lie ever told is about us. He claimed that human beings, modern human beings, didn't evolve naturally on Earth, at least not entirely. Instead, we were engineered. Seeded by over 20 extraterrestrial species, each contributing a piece of the puzzle that would become Homo sapiens. We are, in his words, a living library, part physical, part spiritual, part cosmic. A hybrid race with unimaginable potential. And that potential is exactly what makes us dangerous. Collier said that some of the races involved in our creation were benevolent. Teachers, guardians, but others had darker motives. They wanted control, ownership, and most of all, compliance. To keep humanity suppressed, he said those negative factions implemented a long-term strategy, erase the truth of our origins, fragment our understanding of history, and program us with systems designed to divide and conquer. False religions, engineered wars, artificial scarcity, all tools in a very old playbook. Because if we ever remembered what we really are, If we truly understood our heritage, we would become ungovernable, impossible to manipulate. We'd become what Collier said we were always meant to be: sovereign, psychic, interdimensional creators. But that knowledge didn't just vanish. According to him, it was hidden. He claimed the real history of humanity, the full story, was buried in 3 places: Antarctica, the Moon, and underground bases scattered across the Earth. In Antarctica, he said, beneath miles of ice, lie the ruins of ancient extraterrestrial cities, structures far older than the last ice age, built by beings that once walked openly among us. On the Moon, Collier claimed there are archives, holographic records stored by off-world civilizations, monitoring the rise and fall of species across the galaxy, including ours. And underground, he said there are bases, some built by humans, some not, where hybrid experiments continue to this day, where dark factions conduct research, genetic manipulation, and in some cases, rituals, to maintain their grip on the surface world. It sounds like science fiction, but according to Collier, it's more like classified history. He said that uncovering the truth of our origin isn't just about curiosity, it's about survival, because a species that knows what it is can't be enslaved. And the clock, he warned, is ticking. Secret government deals. In the 1950s, something changed. According to Alex Collier, this was the decade the US government made a decision that would alter the course of human history, and not for the better. He claimed that in the early years of the Cold War, as nations scrambled for technological dominance, officials in the US were approached by a group of extraterrestrials known as the Greys. These beings weren't warm or wise or here to help. They were clinical, strategic, and they came with a deal. In exchange for advanced technology, metallurgy, propulsion systems, electromagnetic weaponry, the Greys wanted something in return: access to humans. According to Collier, this deal allowed the Greys to abduct a limited number of civilians for medical and genetic experimentation. The agreement was supposed to be monitored, controlled, but it quickly spiraled. He alleged that the Greys violated the terms almost immediately, taking far more people than agreed upon and conducting procedures far beyond what was disclosed. And the government? Instead of shutting it down, they covered it up. Collier pointed to the rise of massive black budget operations, secret projects funded by taxpayer money but hidden from public oversight. Billions, he said, were funneled into underground bases, deep space monitoring systems, and reverse engineering labs. He wasn't the only one saying this. Other whistleblowers, former military officers, intelligence insiders, aerospace engineers began to emerge over the decades, quietly confirming the existence of these deals. And then there's the data no one likes to talk about, the disappearances. Thousands of people every year vanish without a trace, no signs of struggle, no suspects, just gone. And here's the weird part, Collier said. Some of these Black Ops projects have never been publicly explained, not even decades later. It's like they were erased from history. He claimed entire facilities have been built, not just to work with the Greys, but to house joint operations between extraterrestrials and humans. Places where the boundaries between species, ethics, and consent start to blur. If true, it means the governments we think are in charge may not be in charge at all. And the real decisions, the ones that affect all of us, are happening far out of sight. 6. Timeline wars. Most people think of time as a straight line, past, present, future, one direction, no detours. But according to Alex Collier, that's not how it works. At all. He claimed that Earth isn't just the stage for a political or spiritual battle, it's the epicenter of something much bigger. A war not just across space, but across time itself. He called it the Timeline Wars. According to Collier, there are future civilizations, some human, some not, locked in a struggle over their own survival. The problem is their futures depend on our present, so they're reaching back into our timeline to nudge things, to shift key events, to try to rewrite the past in their favor. Some of these factions want us to evolve. They're trying to steer us toward awakening, toward freedom. But others want us fractured, fearful, and controlled because that leads to their desired future. A version of reality where they stay on top. And how do they influence us? Subtle manipulations, disruptions in memory, inconsistencies in history, false flags, missing time, and sometimes something even stranger. What if déjà vu? Is someone editing reality? Collier said these timeline skirmishes create ripples, echoes we feel but can't quite explain. Moments that glitch, people remembering events differently, things shifting just slightly out of place. The Mandela effect, glitches in the Matrix. According to him, these aren't just psychological quirks. They're residue from reality being rewritten. And here's the wild part. He believed Earth is ground zero in this war because of who we are. He claimed the human soul, especially the Earth-human soul, is incredibly powerful. It radiates across dimensions. So whatever happens here doesn't stay here. It echoes outward. It sets the tone for other worlds, other timelines. That's why, he said, so many forces, seen and unseen, are trying to steer us. Because changing Earth's outcome could tilt the entire cosmic balance. So the next time you feel like something's off, like the air just shifted, like you've lived a moment before. 7. The spiritual battleground. For most of his life, Alex Collier talked about technology, aliens, secret governments, and interstellar politics. But beneath all of that, he said there was something deeper, something older, something far more dangerous. The Andromedans told him that Earth isn't just a physical battlefield, it's a spiritual one. According to them, what's happening here isn't just about control of land or resources or even DNA. It's about something invisible, something sacred, something every human carries, whether they know it or not. Consciousness. They said the real war, the final war, won't be fought with bombs or lasers or machines. It will be fought with belief, with intention, with awareness. Because in this universe, the most powerful weapon is thought. Collier believed that dark forces, both human and non-human, have spent thousands of years trying to suppress that truth. They don't want us to know how powerful we are, how creative, how connected, because the moment we do, their control ends. Fear, division, distraction, that's the spell. And breaking it doesn't require rebellion, it requires remembering. He said each human being is like a beacon, an antenna tuned to higher dimensions, but most of us have been jammed, interfered with, kept asleep by systems that hijack our minds and emotions, religion, politics, media, even education. But if enough of us wake up, not just intellectually but spiritually, then everything changes. Reality itself begins to shift. The Andromedans warned that Earth is being watched, not just by distant civilizations, but by forces beyond time and space. They said this moment, our moment, is a test. Because if we can rise above the noise, if we can see through the illusion, then humanity becomes something new, something free. And if we don't, then we stay in the loop, controlled, recycled, forgotten. So maybe the real battle isn't out there at all. Maybe it's in here, in every choice, every thought, every moment we decide to act from fear or from something higher. Because in the end, Collier said, the fate of Earth won't be decided by governments or aliens. It will be decided by us. 8. Prophecy or pattern. Alex Collier made his most startling predictions over 30 years ago. At the time, people dismissed him as fringe, a conspiracy theorist, a storyteller with a wild imagination. But now, decades later, things are starting to look different. In the early 90s, Collier warned of a future defined by artificial intelligence, digital surveillance, and a growing alliance between corporate and governmental power. Back then, it sounded impossible. Today, it's just normal. We now live in a world where facial recognition cameras scan crowds in real time, where AI can write our emails, diagnose our illnesses, and even predict crimes before they happen, where global currencies are shifting toward fully digital control systems, where social credit systems, once unthinkable, are being tested in real life. And Collier didn't just mention tech. He warned about a rise in fear-based control, where society would be managed not through brute force, but through psychological warfare. Sound familiar? Think of how often we're bombarded with anxiety. Crisis after crisis, from pandemics to climate catastrophes to wars and economic collapse. The fear never stops, and according to Collier, that's by design. He said dark forces feed on human fear, that it's not just energy, it's currency. And right now, business is booming. He also spoke of a hidden elite, ancient bloodlines, secret networks embedded in governments, militaries, and global finance. Not theory, structure. A system built to keep humanity distracted, divided, and disempowered. Now think about the way power seems to move behind closed doors. How unelected global entities influence health policies, finance, and even speech. How billion-dollar black budget programs exist, documented by auditors, but no one knows where the money actually goes. How thousands of people vanish every year, and no one can explain it. Collier also warned of a battle over Earth's timeline. That reality itself would start to feel unstable, that we'd begin to question memory, truth, even time. And now people around the world are reporting Mandela effects, glitches in memory, a rising sense that something isn't right, that history is being edited. So maybe the question isn't, was Alex Collier right? Maybe the real question is, are we already living in the very timeline he tried to warn us about? And if we are, then the next move might be ours. The final warning. After years of public appearances, interviews, and warnings that most people didn't want to hear, Alex Collier faded into the background. He didn't cash in. He didn't launch a brand. He just disappeared. But before he vanished from the public eye, he left behind one final message, a cryptic closing statement he claimed came directly from the Andromedans. The time is coming. You will have to choose. Not between left or right, not between nations or ideologies, but between awakening and extinction. And if you are not conscious when that moment arrives, you won't even realize you've already chosen. He didn't say when, he didn't say how, only that a moment was coming, a window as he called it. And if we miss it, we don't get another. Now to this day, no one can prove Alex Collier's claims. Not the Andromedans, not the secret treaties, not the buried cities in Antarctica, not the timeline wars twisting our memories. But look around. We're living in an era where truth is fragmenting, where reality itself feels unstable, where we're being asked to trust systems that no longer make sense and give up freedoms in exchange for safety we never actually receive. Maybe Alex Collier was just a man with a vivid imagination, or maybe he saw the fork in the road before the rest of us. And if that's true, if we are in the final stretch of a spiritual war disguised as politics, economics, and technology, then you have to ask yourself, what if the real test of your lifetime doesn't come with a warning? What if it's already happening? And the only way to pass is to wake up before you realize you're asleep. This has been The True Tomorrow. Stay curious, stay questioning, and above all, stay awake.